Hello and welcome to this edition of the Red Mike Dialogues. I'm Sanketupadhyay. Now, as we all know, that generally, as a general proposition, whenever there is conflict, there must definitely be a strong pitch for peace. That is how you will go forward. There are only two ways of resolving a conflict: dialogue, that will help attain peace. That has been one of the big focus behind launching a brand called the Red Mike Dialogues. And in today's episode, we are going to talk about the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine and how there should be a prioritization of conversations for peace. Isn't that the need of the hour? Now, the world was divided, as you know, during the Bali G20 also. We all saw how the world was deeply divided when this conflict broke out. But then came 2023, the India G20, where almost unanimously we were able to touch upon this very crucial aspect. And perhaps in some way, without touching or going into great detail on the political outcome, attain a unanimous view that war is not the solution. India has made that abundantly clear as well. And yet it enjoys a unique position where it has friendly ties with Russia and a very good working relationship with Ukraine. Is it now time, perhaps, for India to leverage that position, to perhaps think of brokering peace between these two nations, be that peace builder, use this very unique position and opportunity to its advantage? There is a peace summit that is expected to happen in Switzerland. Should India be a participant, and what role should India play in prioritizing conversations for peace? I would like to introduce our guests on the Red Mike Dialogues. We have Suhasini Haidar, Editor Foreign Affairs of The Hindu. Thank you very much, Suhasini, for joining us. We also have Major General Ashok Kumar. He is the Director General for Center for Joint Warfare Studies. Thank you very much, Major General Kumar. K.S. Dakshinamurthy is the Managing Editor of The Federal. Thank you very much, Dakshinaji, for joining us. And in just a short moment, we'll have Dr. Swasti Rao also, fellow at the Europe and Eurasia Center, Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis. Let's begin this broadcast by me asking all of you what you feel. Your opening comments, and then we'll throw this up for a dialogue and a discussion. Suhasini, let's begin with you. Your opening comments, your opening views.
Well, I think it's necessary for the world as a whole to take stock before they go any further. It's all very well to say you must have a peace conference, but there are certain baselines. To begin with, we are now 2 years into the Ukraine crisis. It seems, at least from what we have heard so far, in terms of the position on the ground, that of the extra territory that Russia was able to take in Ukraine after February 24, 2022, it has not been pushed back in more than perhaps 3 or 4%. So Russia today stands in control of about 17% of Ukrainian territory that it has been able to take, and it has not been pushed back so far. That would indicate that while Ukrainian forces have been very, very brave and have really mounted a counter challenge to Russia in many ways, many casualties as a result of that war, but that they are not able to take the next leap, that is in terms of taking back land. At that point, if you want to have a peace conference, then a few things are necessary. To begin with, both sides must at least want a ceasefire. At present, the ceasefire does not actually support Ukraine's cause. The Ukrainian government, as well as its allies in the West, have made it clear they don't want a ceasefire, because a ceasefire would mean accepting the status quo. Russia will not accept any kind of a peace deal that involves it giving back territory that it has, giving back territory over a table that it has taken on the ground. So you're in a bit of a catch-22 situation. And at that time, you have this push for a peace summit in Switzerland. For India, it's certainly a positive step, because India has always, its position has been that it wants some kind of peace between the two. And the violence of the last 2 years have had an impact not only on casualties in Russia and Ukraine, but also for the global south when it comes to food security, fertilizer security, energy security. Even so, it becomes difficult for India to become a peace process where no clear outcome seems to be in place, and put its credibility behind such a purpose. I think my final point would be that perhaps the Swiss wanted to make a start, which is what they have done with the idea of this peace conference. But in terms of the modalities of it, have made it sound like a very one-sided conference. To begin with, the idea that it was a conference held at the behest of President Zelensky makes it seem as if, in some way, the outcomes are what Ukraine would want. The second is that in the invitation letter, including the one sent to Prime Minister Modi, what has been said is that they hope to build on a number of peace processes and UN charter and that sort of thing, but also the Ukrainian peace formula. And now, at a time when there are so many others in this situation who are also trying to work on different formulas, to say very specifically it's the Ukrainian peace formula that they will try to build on, again, gives it a one-sided feel. Finally, the idea that Switzerland announced they were not inviting Russia. It wasn't Russia may have sounded negative about the conference, but it was Switzerland who said, we will not invite Russia to this round, maybe a future round. Again, that makes it very difficult for those countries like India who prefer to keep a balance.
Right. K.S. Dakshinamurthy, I now want to come to you. Your opening comments on what you feel needs to be done and what sort of role India can play in this peace conference.
This very, heading that it's a peace conference. It's not really a peace conference because the two parties to the dispute are not there. It's only Ukraine that's going to be around. So Russia is not there. So what kind of a peace are we talking about? Right? So in fact, the way this whole thing has been organized, it seems to be to me more like a war carrying on through other means. The peace is more like a war carrying on through other means, because the idea behind this peace conference is actually to put pressure on Russia. That is what they are hoping to do, because really nothing is going to come of it. And then if you take a country like India, India has two options. India can go two ways. One is it's jammed between Russia and Ukraine. It can't afford to antagonize Russia, nor can it afford to antagonize the US. So it can't do anything. So to begin with, India is neutralized. But at the same time, you also have, if you flip the coin, you have the other side where India can leverage its position to talk to both Ukraine and to Russia, and or to the West and to Russia, and then see if something can be worked out. So it just depends. So it's at that stage right now. And as far as India is concerned, India has already announced that I think there's going to be not a very big powered committee, but some mid-level officials who may just go to the conference. So it also in a way indicates the position India is in. And as far as the peace conference itself is concerned, you have China, which China has said it's not going to attend. Then you have Brazil, which has also said it's not going to be attending, and even Pakistan. So it's already getting divided even before the peace conference is starting. So even in fact, South Africa is also contemplating, and it may probably not go through with it, which means this whole BRICS group itself, may not be fully in attendance. So it's more to get some kind of it's a more some kind of a pressure that Ukraine and the West is trying to put on Russia to resolve it. So that's how I see it.
Right. Major General Ashok Kumar, your opening comments.
Sanket, thanks a ton for giving me this opportunity. My predecessors have already spoken their mind and brought out very valid points. But what we have to understand, this is not a conflict, repeat, not a conflict between Russia and Ukraine. It is a conflict between Russia and United States led NATO, where Ukraine is just a front. If you remember, before these special operations were launched by Russia, there were some bottom line demands. And one of them was that Ukraine should not join NATO. They should not be allowed to join NATO. And NATO should not move eastwards. I am sure all of you will remember that post World War II, both the sides, NATO and the Warsaw-led countries, were having opposition to each other, and that is how the Cold War era continued till 1991. But in 1991, when Soviet Union dissolved and allowed even the East Germany to unify, a basic understanding was given that NATO will not expand eastwards. Leave aside that commitment being honored, NATO has come on the doorstep of Russia in form of Ukraine also inclined and effort being made to join them. So before the conflict, they said that this was something which was to be talked between USA and Russia. Then Russia was willing, but USA did not come forward. And all those who are monitoring this military conflict will know that it is the USA and their allied military power which is actually being pitted against Russia. There have been 4 international conferences before this current conference, which is going to happen in mid-June, and all of them had agenda and discussion points which pertain to the US interest. It was not related to interest of Russia. Even the China, which proposed its peace formula, that was totally biased against Russia because of their no limit friendship. Even now, when this finally peace process is going to take place, the agenda points which have been proposed by Mr. Zelensky are something which cannot be agreed by Russia. So this peace process, to my mind, is just a show of force by the USA and West to say that those many countries are for them and trying to put Russia and China and so-called that new emerging axis in a different light. Otherwise, how you can have a peace where the Russia is not being represented? Suppose they did not call for Russia for whatever reasons. At least they could have worked hard diplomatically to get China at least a kind of flag to for Russia if they were keen to resolve this. As far as India's position is concerned, India has already stated a number of times, including what you highlighted in G20, that the dialogue is the best process. In any case, war is not good for anybody in any party. And who can know it better than a soldier? That it is the peace which is loved by soldiers and everybody else.
Exactly. Suhasini, just quickly coming back to you, I want to understand, you see, how do you assess this very careful, nuanced neutrality in position by India? We have an amazing situation where we can be in dialogue. We advocate dialogue as we did in G20. We will also engage with the Russians, buy Russian oil, at the same time maintain very close ties with the United States in a very polarized world order. You have India championing itself, number one, as a leader of the global south, and number two, having such cordial arrangements and associations with everyone. Now, don't you think that this makes India best suited to walk the talk? If we are saying that there should be dialogue, here is one such opportunity. Then you can weigh in and say that, get in the Russians. How else do you expect peace if you don't get in the Russians?
Well, Sankeet, I do have to say there's a little bit of hype to this idea that India is somehow in the middle of this whole thing and is somehow in a position to decide what the future is going to be. I don't think that's the case. I think whether it is Russia, whether it is Ukraine, whether it is the West, Europe, and the US, and certainly whether it is China, India is not one of the big players in all of this. There is a position, as you have pointed out, there is a place for someone who wants to advocate peace, for some country that wants to try and make a difference. But I think the government in New Delhi has consistently decided it does not want to be that party. After all, if you look back to the last 2 years, India's position has been very clearly, we will not stop our engagement with Russia, no matter what. In February of 2022, India got about 0.5% of its oil requirements from Russia. By the end of 2023, it was between 30 to 40% that India was importing from Russia. So there was no question about cutting down ties with Russia. It's another matter that when it comes to defense ties, in any case, year on year, there's been a secular decline in India's import share from Russia, simply because there have been other players in the market. The second point is when it comes to Ukraine. While it is true that India has kept up ties with Ukraine, and certainly when India was trying to bring all its students back to India safely at the beginning of the war, the government had sent a lot of aid to Ukraine. But it has never been more than that amount, what we call tents and blankets, food and medicine. It has never been in any way to help Ukraine somehow deal with the situation in any larger sphere. I'll give you an example. The Ukrainian foreign minister was in India a few months ago. One of the things Ukraine has been demanding is all kinds of infrastructure that India makes much more cheaply, telecom infrastructure, medical infrastructure, hospital equipment, and that sort of thing, and construction equipment. But none of those are going from India. The government does not allow any of those, what they call dual use equipment, to go to Ukraine. So, in a sense, India is not exactly in the middle. India is in a position where it has a better relationship with Russia at present, and is not under any pressure from the West in real terms to end that relationship. I say that simply because none of the Western powers are actually putting much pressure on India to right now. They're not announcing sanctions, for example, or pushing in the way perhaps they were at the beginning of the war. So India is in a situation where it is doing the least possible amount it can to stay in a position where it is not either hurting or harming its own interests. I think that is a more honest description of where India is at present. Given that situation, will India take that next leap and say, now I will put some skin in the game? I will actually ask people to come together. I think one of the big points will be what is India's not so much credibility, but what is its influence? What is its leverage? After all, there are other countries that are also running peace processes. They each have leverage of the kind where they can make a difference. Maybe India hasn't tried to push that.
I'll tell you, just to add on to what you're saying, Suhasini, you asked what sort of leverage do we have? Let's say this very strong position that we've been able to put ourselves into as far as the global south is concerned. What about all those from the global south who are part of this peace process, and how they would be looking at India? And if we do take a position, how do we cement our position in that bloc?
I think that's a fair point. Both the Swiss government, as well as the Ukrainians, as well as others who have come to Delhi to try and convince New Delhi to attend this conference, excuse me, at a higher level, are basically making that point. That if India was to send a leader, either Prime Minister Modi or the Foreign Minister, it would be sending a message to the rest of the global south. The problem there again is that that we create this idea that if the way India goes, the rest of the global south will follow. No, India has made common cause with the global south. India has projected the concerns of the global south. Even during the G20, that is something that India did very successfully, I might add. But were it to head in one direction, is it necessary the global south to follow? I'm not quite sure. I'll give you a small example. On the first vote when it came to Israel, on the first UNGA vote calling for a ceasefire, India actually abstained from that vote because of its very strong position on terrorism. Not one other member of the global south abstained. Every other member actually voted for the motion calling for a ceasefire. And eventually India changed its position. And by December 8th or 10th, actually voted for a ceasefire. So I'm not sure, many of these narratives are created within an Indian environment because obviously everybody wants to feel that we are that important. And it is necessary for us to have, a position on these very important international issues. But the truth is, India does not take a position for a very specific reason. As a former Prime Minister said, taking no decision is also a decision. Because India feels that these exactly India's making. If India was to wade into it, there has to be the idea that India can make a difference, and B, that actually both sides want India to be there. The third point I will add is that India has always been very sensitive about third party interventions in its own conflict. and therefore will not really want to make the point that I will be the third party in your conflict. And I don't think that there are too many examples in the past of that either.
Yeah. Mr. Dakshinamurthy, if you want to come in on this point that we are discussing on India using its position, leveraging it to, perhaps send a larger message in the world, cement its position among the global south as well, please feel free to. But beyond that, my other important question is that, you see, this has to come to an end as well, because there are geopolitical implications, there are economic implications if this situation continues. And India is as affected as any other country in the world.
Yeah, I mean, no one disputes that it's really time that the war came to an end, because it has affected the world. It's going to continue to affect, and in that sense, also India is in a very sensitive position because it's now sourcing its oil from Russia, and any kind of a disturbance to that is going to really affect not only India but also certain parts of Europe, which depends on India for their oil now, which comes via Russia. So, see, basically what the Russia-Ukraine war is really pointing to the world is that there is really a fault line, and this is really stuck at the heart of that fault line, because you really have two UN Security Council members actually at each other's throat, the US and Russia on this, and China is backing Russia, and the other two are backing the US. So the point is, this is not going to happen. This peace is not going to happen so easily. And the unfortunate part is, the longer it takes for this conflict to end, it's going to get even more difficult, because the way things are going between, in the war, Russia is just inching, inch by inch, it's getting into Ukraine. There are periodic victories that Ukraine may have, but overall, it's the Russians who are actually moving into Ukraine. And more they move into Ukraine, it's going to be that much more difficult for them to move back. So it's going to be really sticky, and there is also this issue of nuclear weapons, and an occasional threat from Putin saying that they won't hesitate to use nuclear weapons. These kind of it's very worrying, because this is unless this needs to be resolved, there's no two things about it. But how does the world resolve this conflict? Because it's really between these two blocks. This old Cold War rivalry in some ways has now become it's playing out in front of us, and something like India will be just pushed this way and that, because Suhasini is saying that India is really not a big player in world affairs to influence a big country, or a group to change its mind or even listen to what India is saying. So I mean, it's a very tough situation, as far as I'm concerned.
Right. Major General Kumar, let me ask you this question. You see, there is a war economy, and we all know about that. Supplying of weapons and keeping the war alive, because that helps someone make money. And then there are economic implications of a war that continues to go on, which then affects even all those who are not part of the war. So in that context, do you think that getting a solution in place to the Russia-Ukraine conflict is in greater interest for a country like India, which may benefit from there not being a war, but may not necessarily benefit if there is one? Because we are
There
not
is no
supplying
doubt.
arms, are we?
I'm sure this August gathering and the listeners will be knowing that as of now, close to 70% of our defense equipment is of Russian origin. Russia, having been involved in this war, is not able to meet its own defense requirement, and not only India but balance 70 countries in the world are also suffering. Because of this conflict, the grain export from Ukraine and number of other exports, both from Russia and Ukraine, are adversely affecting. And the countries of global South, Africa, and Latin America, everybody is suffering. Inflation is skyrocketing, as well as the cost of everything is going high. So it is in the interest of Russia, Ukraine, and more than that, in the interest of India and global South, that this war ends fast. People have already suffered a lot because of the COVID-19 effects for 2 years. And when
Yeah.
it was time for the world to recover from the economic so-called recession, this war has put everything in a reversal position. So therefore, there is no doubt the war economy can grow. But if you see this conflict as such, except the USA, no one else's war economy is growing. Everybody else is suffering. Entire ammunition of the world is almost over in this conflict, followed by what is happening between Hamas and Israel. So the economy, except Russia, nobody is gaining. And as far as suffering is concerned, that is affecting India as well as entire global south. We have more resilient economy, so the impact will be relatively less. But of course, it will impede the process of our growth as well. But the other countries who are not having that kind of economy, they are going to have tough time because of this continuation of this conflict.
Right, right, exactly. So, Asni, exactly on this point, just want to come back to you. You see, whether we choose to participate in this peace summit or peace conference or not, but should that not mean that we should be open to the idea of engaging in peace and dialogue on at an international platform? Because as we were discussing, you see, war economy helps a few, but the war is bad news on the economic front for all, including India. Let me just unmute you. Yeah.
I think that's a fact, and there have been many interventions by India so far on that specific point. The fact is that it was India that made a push to say it would continue to buy oil from Russia, even when sanctions were being threatened. Of course, they were never made good on. Whereas the EU and the US have started their own kinds of sanctions on their own alliance partners over procuring goods from Russia, India has stayed well out of that. The truth is that it is not just India, but as you said, the global south that is affected by this problem of energy security, food security, and fertilizer security. Because apart from being the wheat basket of the world, this Ukraine and Russian area, it is also a huge supplier of fertilizer for the world. And finally, it is to India's detriment if you see a resultant kind of, I mean, it's an extreme word to use, but it's what moves in the direction of a de-dollarization. In other words, that putting aside old globalized multilateral organizations, many countries are now dealing in an economy which is not necessarily working with the global economy. If that were to continue, that would again be to India's detriment. After all, India's biggest worry has been this Russia-China détente, coming together of Russia and China in all of this, and making Russia dependent on China, which is why Dr. Jaishankar, the External Affairs Minister, said a few months ago that instead of closing the door on Russia, the West, in fact, should be finding ways to open windows for Russia to work this through. So that has always been India's thinking, this consistent worry when it comes to the economy. Even so, Sanket, I would say that that worry does not translate, not as of yet, into India actually taking a stand. Apart from that one statement quoted again and again that Prime Minister Modi said to Mr. Putin, this era is not of war. India has consistently stayed out of the debate. If you look at the United Nations General Assembly Security Council that we were members of in 2022, the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, nuclear issues that India cares about, or the Human Rights Council, India has abstained on any resolution that is mildly critical of Russia. General Ashok Kumar referred to the nuclear, the nuclear threat perceptions coming from Russia's actions. But when there was a UNGA resolution put forth by Mexico and France, I think they had co-drafted it, actually criticizing Russia on that issue as well, India refused to vote, India had abstained. So I think we have to be realistic about where India and particularly this government has decided to stand. It is a very specific place which takes care of India's interests first. And I don't
Yeah.
think one should be, in any way embarrassed about that, but one should not be surprised by that either. So far, India has not taken that next step it would involve in getting involved in an international peace reconciliation effort.
But you see, this is an effort. Yes, I get your point, Suhasini, that we have been very careful about our interests first on any international platform. But in Europe, as these, first of all, the G7, which is happening in Italy, and then in Switzerland, where many of those participating in the G7 will be a part of this Global Peace Summit, should India be considering this either now or later? Dr. Swasti Rao is a fellow with the IDSA. Thank you very much, Dr. Rao, for joining us. I'm familiar with your views. I saw an interview as well where you feel that it is the right time for India to play that very crucial role. Uh, do you concur? Do you agree? And why do you think so?
While thank you so much, Sanket, for having me on your show, and
My pleasure, Dr. Rao.
yeah, and good evening, because I am right now in Stockholm, so it's afternoon here, and good evening to the rest of the panelists. Well, yes, very quickly, I feel that we in India, and I'll be very realistic because I completely agree with what Suhasini just said about being realistic. I think we need to be realistic, and 2.5 years into the war, the least we could do, and the rest of the world could do, to be realistic about it. And I think, in my understanding, one of the ways in which we can be realistic is to understand what really is this peace, what role can India play. I don't think that India can play a meaningful role with total mediation. With total mediation, I mean that bringing the war to an end. Yes, we could have this commitment towards peace, and we could reiterate it at different platforms, like the Prime Minister has been doing. But talking technically about where the war is, at this stage, and what really is happening with the rest of the global dynamics flowing in and out of the war, I think we need to be realistic. Total mediation should not really be a preferred strategy. I think what India should be really looking at is limited mediation. And when you talk of this upcoming peace summit in Switzerland, I think it is working on two levels. One is that it is familiarizing the rest of the global south with what really is the Ukrainian perspective. And I think that's also important to know, because just as Russia has all the, so to say, right to sort of voice the security concerns, so has Ukraine. So in many ways, these peace summits, everybody knows that no final outcome is going to come out of these peace summits. That is not possible, especially not right now where the war is. But at the same time, it creates more leverage, with the global south. It creates more dialogues. It creates more mechanisms, So I think that is a welcome step in that regard. Number one. With what can India do? I have been writing and talking for a while now that I think what India should be, and I mentioned, should be doing, is to focus on limited mediation. What I mean by limited mediation is that if you look at the say the 10-point peace plan by President Zelensky. Now, of course, everybody in Ukraine and the West and Europe understands that India would always want to continue with its relationship with Russia. I don't think there is any confusion there. Russia remains a very important partner for India. But when it comes to Ukraine, if you look carefully, even the 10-point peace plan, and I and Suhasini were very much a part of that gathering when Dmytro Kuleba was in India, and he specifically mentioned that what we expect from India is that whatever is suitable to you, so come forward, underline that, and then work in that regard. And from my perspective, from what I have been working on, I can say that limited mediation strategies are going to be more fruitful. For example, in exchange of prisoners of war. For example, in ensuring there is an unbroken supply of grain to the rest of the world, where of course global south is very, very vulnerable. On, for example, demining, for example, the use of chemical weapons. So I think if you sort of come together with countries that are largely affected by the net suffering of a war, which has become a war of attrition, I think it is easy and it is workable, feasible to actually underline these specific issues and then to mediate around those specific issues, and not just to call for a total mediation, because I do not see the war ending anytime before 2026 at least. Back to you,
Yes,
Sanket.
Dakshinamurthy, would you agree? I mean, this is more realistic. I mean, it keeps or protects, as Suhasini was saying, our interests. They are kept. They are paramount. At the same time, you're not upsetting any equation that we have with any power center. Let me unmute you.
Assume
Yeah.
that Yeah. Let's assume that India sticks its neck out and sends a, let's say, a high-powered delegation to Switzerland. What is going to happen at the peace conference? I mean, there is going to be no talk of any peace. There is going to be a resolution which may be passed at the end of it, which is going to detail and what Russia should be doing. That's not peace. So, in fact, I really even my basic problem is with this peace conference itself. I think this is not a peace conference at all. It's just been given that name. That's it. So nothing is going to happen. As an alternative, let me tell you this: that let's assume that Russia was also part of this peace conference. Okay, and there would have been no hesitation in countries sending their topmost people. Like the prime minister could have gone from India, the foreign minister could have gone from India. You would have had people, the Chinese president coming in. You would have had Brazil taking part in it at a high level. So it would have been a genuine effort by the world's leaders to sit in some place and try to thrash out the issue, come to some kind of a compromise, something like that. But this is a wasted, useless conference. It's just a political showmanship of the West. I would in fact say this is not at all a peace conference. So I think we are really wasting our time on this.
Yes, Suhasini wants to come in. I'll come to you, Dr. Rao. One more. Suhasini.
I think while the nature of the peace conference is important, and everybody wants to engage with only this, let's remember there's a lot of conversations happening around the peace conference as well, which India is a part of. To begin with, if you look at Prime Minister Modi's own travel schedule in the next couple of weeks, this week he's headed to Italy, to Apulia, where there's the G7 outreach going on, which India has been consistently always invited to. There he'll meet the Western leadership. He'll meet the US president. He'll meet British, French, German. The G7 has consistently put Ukraine on their agenda to discuss it. Whether or not India joins the G7 outreach, other countries in signing on something or not, India will be part of those discussions. A couple of weeks after that, India will also head, Prime Minister Modi is expected to head to Kazakhstan, to Astana, for the SCO summit. That's where you'll see the other perspective. President Putin is expected to be there, President Xi Jinping, the Pakistani Prime Minister, Central Asian leaders, the Iranian president as well, if the elections permit him. So I think what you will see is India articulating its positions, but not necessarily doing it at a leadership level at the Swiss conference, because so far what we understand is that the government is not going to send a political leadership to the conference. It would probably be a senior MEA official, the secretary for the West, or the India's ambassador there, who will attend. However, I have been in touch with officials who are part of the organization, and they've consistently said that we will not give up until the actual date of the conference, until the 15th. And of course, Prime Minister Modi being there in Italy, just across the Alps, if you like, from the peace conference, it will be definitely an effort, I'm sure, on the part of many of those organizers to try and bring him over.
What are the odds of that happening? We know it's really rare. It does not usually happen. Apart from that exception in Pakistan, where nobody knew that the Prime Minister is going to land there, and it happened. Those were different times.
It would certainly be unusual and unexpected. Yet, as you pointed out, this is a Prime Minister who has taken unusual steps in the past. And if he were to go maybe even for a couple of hours, it would, of course, change the dynamics considerably. But I don't think anyone is holding their breath more than anything.
But Suhasini, let me ask you this question, and also Major General Kumar. Do you think that any outcome will now be also dictated from the fact that this is not Narendra Modi 3.0, but an NDA government? It's an alliance government, which means, I know this conference is really close, but does coalition become a factor in foreign policy? Or will it become a factor, according to you, going forward in peace conferences?
Should I go first?
Yes, please.
Just to make the point that we seem to have this idea that coalitions slow down foreign policy, whereas singular leaders have much more decisive foreign policy. I don't think that's the case in India. So I'm just making that point that in the 90s, we had a series of coalitions, yet they were able to make a number of very, very strong positions, whether it was on funding the Northern Alliance during the Afghanistan Taliban takeover, whether it was the composite dialogue with Pakistan or dealing with Bangladesh and Nepal. So we've seen coalition governments also in the past. It was a coalition government of Prime Minister Manmohan Singh that began the nuclear deal, although it was the coalition government before that of Prime Minister Vajpayee that set the pieces in motion. So I wouldn't necessarily assume that a coalition would somehow slow the Prime Minister down.
No, maybe alter India's position in favor of being an active participant in a peace conference. That's what I meant.
Does
Or
General
is it too early?
Kumar have something to say? Because I would assume no, India's foreign policy has been fairly consistent, and I think if you see what
Correct.
India has done since 2022, perhaps in fact we've heard again and again that any other government may have done the same thing.
Major General Kumar, your views? Yeah, one moment.
At least, if not both, one party to the conflict signals some positive measures. This conference was decided months back. So as against anything happening on ground, what has been done by Mr. Zelensky and USA, they have allowed their long-range weapons to be fired in Russia, which has already started happening. So these things happening just on a period of this day indicates that it is a non-serious activity and it's just being done for the heck of it. Now coming to the coalition government, vis-a-vis the Modi 1 and 2, if that is being commented, I think the current profile of the coalition government will not have any impact whatsoever on the Indian foreign policy because of that. There may be other reasons, but I don't think the government and its posturing is is in a position that they can navigate their national interest strategically very well.
That's right. Dr. Swasti Rao, just quickly coming back to you, you see the bigger point over here that at least one is trying to understand is that we have a rather, what should I say, a subdued response when it comes to taking a very active position in brokering peace. And you feel that that may not be a very ideal thing to do as well. But to use a conference like this to promote what you feel is directly affecting you economically, that I'm forgetting the word that you used. Not playing an active role, but at the same time,
Mediation.
Yes, that sort of mediation which immediately takes into consideration your concerns. And it does concern us. What is happening between Russia and Ukraine does concern us. Not at a diplomatic level, at an economic level. So in that sense, do you think that these conferences can play that very, very crucial role where we address those points, just like we did in G20 in Delhi?
Yeah, so very quickly, I think there are...
Saket, I will seek your permission to leave because
Okay, so very quickly, I think
Sure.
we are basically talking about...
Just one moment, Dr. Rao, just one moment. Thank you very much, Major General Kumar, for joining us. Thank you. We're just ending this.
Okay.
thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, may I
Yes,
go ahead?
Dr. Rao, please. Yes, please.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So I think what we're discussing
We'll take
here is
closing
a clear-
comments after this.
Yeah. So basically, we are sort of discussing 3-4 things which are also related, but at the same time separate at the same time, and it kind of leads to these, very confusing outcomes. That okay, with no Russia on board, what is the purpose of this peace summit? And I agree. If you are assuming that the purpose of this particular peace summit is an isolated peace summit, which is going to give you a solution of the end state of the war in Ukraine. Yes, of course. Don't expect anything from it, okay? But if the assumption is that you look at it in terms of a calibrated process, which is going to get to other issues, like you mentioned, about food security, about fuel, and why do you think all the countries in the developing world of the global south that are otherwise neutral in this war have been active proponents of such peace summits, whether it's the Saudi Arabia last year, Saudi Arabia, UAE, there is a lot of excitement in that part of the world to hold these peace summits. Why? Because, I think end of the day, you have to stop looking at it right now where we stand as a zero-sum game versus a more collaborative approach towards where the world powers are standing, where the middle order powers are standing, because the Russia-Ukraine conflict and the war is affecting the entire world. So I think you need to sort of recalibrate our assumption, our fundamental assumption of what really are we having this peace summit for. So that is why I say that we should not be really talking about the total mediation, and not because total mediation is not important. I'd like to reiterate that. I'm saying the total mediation is not shouldn't be focusing too much on that, because the timing is not right for it. Okay, we cannot really think of a total mediation before 2026. The way things are, the way Europe has come up with all these policies to support Ukraine, the way Ukraine, the red lines on using Russian weapons on Russian territory have been lifted. So I mean that's one dynamic. The other thing that I would like to mention, which has not really been discussed so far, and which remains a very important part of why we should be there, is that, listen, sooner than later, whenever the war ends, I think India is going to emerge as a major player in post-conflict reconstruction and rebuilding of Ukraine. In fact, if you really look at the bilateral dialogue between India and Ukraine, it is basically to do with that, about what role can India play in a post-conflict reconstruction. And I can definitely sort of argue that when it comes to the war in Ukraine, I think our larger outreach is going to be embedded in how the Europeans look at it, and all the business, so to say, opportunities that will emerge, countries going there for all the post-conflict reconstruction and the rebuilding. I think what happens is that when you are part of these processes, you are also emerging. I mean, you're also somewhere, drawing that legitimacy to actually be there on the table once the conflict is ending, because obviously it cannot go on for the rest of the eternity.
Sure.
It will end 2 years or 3 years later. So I think my final point would be is to actually look at it in terms of an evolving process, in terms of building and putting together a more collaborative framework, of building peace in the European theater. And lastly, it is also a great opportunity for India, because all the time, we live in South Asia, which is a fractured South Asia because of what the colonial experience did to us. Okay, it kind of, this is the South Asia that we inherited after our independence, and the colonial masters did that to us. And today the tables are reversed, and they are wanting India's participation to actually ensure us, a lasting, sustainable security architecture in Europe. So why not be on the table? I mean, look at it that way.
Sure, sure. Let's quickly take two quick closing comments, one from Mr. Dakshinamurthy and then Suhasini.
Okay. So
Mr. Murthy.
basically, yeah, peace is most important right now. It's imperative. It should happen like yesterday. So I think there's nobody who has any doubts over that. But I think there should also be an element of honesty in the way it's being the countries are going through. In fact, I think the reasons why the war started in the first place, why Russia invaded Ukraine, and the days of the situation preceding that, the forcing Ukraine into NATO, etc., etc. All these reasons, they still haven't. Those reasons still are valid even today. And unfortunately, well, we may be discussing about the impact on this on the rest of the world, economy, etc., etc. Unfortunately, the people who are doing this at the back end are really, I don't think they're really committed to all this. They just want, it's a war, in many fronts that's being fought, and they just want to get at Russia, or put down Russia. All these kind of issues are there, and Russia wants to resist. So you basically have these issues there, and so I don't see how a peace conference like this will work. In fact, if you remember, as soon as the war broke out, there were 2-3 rounds of discussions between Putin and between Russia and Ukraine, but they didn't work. And since then, I don't think there has been an honest effort to resolve this issue. That's how I see.
Okay. Last word, Suhasini Heather.
I think the key thing would be to look at India's past record in order to check on what India is likely to do, where India's imagination might go in the next few months. If in 2022 India was not willing to vote on any of those resolutions at the UN, insisted on abstaining on all of them. If in 2023, when it came to the G20, India did not invite Ukraine to the table, did not invite Ukrainian leaders to speak to the G20 in the way perhaps its predecessor had. It is very difficult to see a scenario in 2024 where India will actively become a part of the peace formula. Instead, it will try to work bilaterally with all of the players without necessarily joining an agenda that has already been preset which unfortunately is the way despite what Dr. Rao says, the way the Swiss conference has already been projected. It seems to have a considered agenda already in terms of working off the Ukraine peace formula, working off the UN resolutions and that sort of thing. While it is not taking on board the two big players. So I think India may wait and see this process through, as there are other processes, there are other players that are already running these processes, before it actually gets skin in the game.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us. And I think the one important takeaway, apart from all the others who spoke, is what Dr. Rao says, partial mediation. It'll be interesting to see how India moves forward in order to protect her own interests at an international forum, and whether this or many like this can be that opportunity for us to protect our own interests. Thank you very much, K.S. Dakshinamurthy, Dr. Swasti Rao, Suhasini Haidar, and Major General Kumar for joining us on this broadcast. Thank you.